Hey, y'all, and welcome back to Learn with Dr. Emily. We are doing another Substack Live today, and today I have Dr. Karalynn Royster with us. She is a co-parenting expert and child psychologist and a mom, which is also important expertise, and she lives in Colorado. And she helps moms navigate the challenges of divorce and co-parenting and specializes in guiding moms through high conflict situations while keeping all the children's emotions the focus. So I wanted to talk today about a question I get so much, which is co-parenting with autistic kids and possibly teens, depending on the time where you are going through this life transition. So Dr. Karalynn, is that what people call you?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Dr. Royster.
Yes. So thank you so much for being here. I know that this is a question that I get from married couples who sometimes feel like they're business partners because there's so much to tackle with parenting and raising an autistic child who has all these therapies and different school decisions and all these school meetings, and there's so many decisions. But I wanted to talk with you about this through the lens of co-parenting, and let's just start by talking about the roles that two parents have in these situations and what can come up that can interfere sometimes in a co-parenting, like this family transition that happens, and what's specific to autistic kids particularly.
Yeah. I think that whenever you're parenting a child with any sort of needs, whether it's medical needs, special needs, neurodivergence of other kinds outside of autism, there is kind of either an unspoken or directly spoken role differentiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That one parent tends to take more of this sort of thing, like maybe it's the medical stuff. One parent takes more scheduling. One parent does the billing. Like there's all these pieces, right? And the hard thing about co-parenting a child with autism is that you still have all those roles. You still have all those obligations. They need to get done for your child to function well and get the support they need. But now you're doing them with somebody that you may not particularly like, or get along with, or that disagrees entirely, right? And so you and I kind of have talked about this. This happens in couples that are together as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like people disagree. But when you add in the layer of now we have decided to go our separate ways, it becomes a much bigger issue and a much bigger
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so ideally, if we can, these roles are very explicitly defined in two-parent homes and worked out well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my husband, I'm still partnered, even though I do divorce work. I'm married. I always feel like I need to. Poor guy. He's like, why are there divorce books all over the house? Anyways, he's my husband's a nurse, right? So he naturally takes a lot of our kids' medical appointments and kind of is the holder of the medical knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very good at scheduling. I'm very good at keeping us going. If we were to separate, we would probably pretty explicitly define those roles
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves, right? But there kind of has to be this extra layer of how you communicate about what's happening because you may or may not both have the same information or the same lens.
Yeah, and do you feel like some families, some co-parenters need a third party to help them define all of those things? They can try at first, right? But in what situations, or I guess if there's a parent listening that's like, I've tried this, but I'm struggling. Like, tell me when, as a clinician, you're like, we need a third party.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest answer to that would be the obvious scary answer, which is medical neglect. We're not getting
Mhm.
medications we need. We're not getting to services we need. Those are pretty clear, right? Our
Right.
God is going to get involved. That's going to be taken care of fairly quickly, right? What you and I are kind of talking about is that lower level stuff,
Hmm.
right? Where it's maybe a personal preference or it's a therapist recommendation. I think they need to keep coming once a week, and one parent does and one parent doesn't, right? Then that's time that we bring in folks that can help make those decisions. So that can be an arbitrator, that can be in Colorado, we call them PCDMs, which are parenting coordinating decision makers. It's kind of the level below that. Many times in these cases, I'm sorry, excuse me, a level below a judge is what I meant
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
before you get into the court. Many times in these cases, they will offer or someone will decide to be the medical decision maker, and then that person gets the final say. And and sometimes that can help mitigate a lot of the problems. We always want that person, let's say it's me, that's the final say. Usually in the court order, it will say something along the lines of you need to seek your co-parent's opinion on this. You need to notify them, hear what they think, and then ultimately the decision rests with you. Um, so yeah, I mean, big fan of third parties. The issue, and I'm sure you see this too, is that working with neurodivergent kids, not everybody understands. Right? And so you want to be really careful and thoughtful about getting that third party that has some knowledge about neurodivergence, right?
Right, right. And I think it can be very confusing to lots of families, and we see this a lot in our work, that as psychologists or therapists, we are not the ones making some of these decisions. We are speaking about roles, clinical roles. Those are questions I want people to ask. What are the limits of what you can recommend? Or let's say I recommend something, but it, can't be implemented because there's too much conflict or something. So, I always encourage parents to ask those questions as well instead of making assumptions, because it's a confusing system, and it's good. Just mental health in general is a confusing system in America. And then throw on top of it that things are confusing with who's in charge. But then I also think what makes me want to talk about this, like publicly on a live like this, is our autistic kids need so much consistency. They need so much predictability in their lives for them to thrive. And so much of these decisions and who's in charge and all of this can have this trickle down effect of stress that really makes me passionate, and probably you too, about making sure that with this particular population, which, all neurodivergent kids tend to be a little bit more neurologically sensitive, but autistic kids tend to be more at risk for some neurological complexities, some, anxiety, medication, their thing, treatment plans, education is really like almost everything is a different discussion of something being challenging. So they're just at a little more higher risk of struggling if the systems around them aren't really consistent and really agreed upon, which kind of takes us into like communication, right? And balancing this out of not just who's in charge, but what are some ways to effectively communicate with your co-parent partner that you would recommend? Whether there's, I guess, I mean, obviously, if there's a third party, that helps, but maybe there's not. Maybe there's a situation where that's, not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it almost needs to be an over communication is what I would say. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but it has a point and will make sense in a second. There is a style of co-parenting that we use in kind of high conflict dynamics called parallel parenting. And it's called parallel because you want to think of it like train tracks. Like a train doesn't cross. I don't know a lot about trains, but they don't cross to the other side unless
Right.
there's like one of those things. I don't know. And how that looks is like when they go to dad's or when they go to mom's, you don't really know what happens over there. You don't really get a say in how they're parented. It feels a little like a black hole. And in a lot of times, that's very protective for the parents, right?
Mhm.
We often recommend this when there's been domestic violence or there's coercive control, like really toxic, icky,
Mhm.
difficult dynamics, right? Children with autism and broadly neurodivergence, I was going to say most kids, but I don't think that's really true. But children with autism are not going to do well in a setting like that, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to be able to communicate and you have to be able to have as much consistency across the train
Mhm.
tracks as possible. And at
Can I pause and interject one reason real quick from my perspective through the lens of working with these kids? So, autistic children are going to have weaknesses in their perspective taking and their language skills and being able to retell a story. And it can be really stressful for them or really confusing to them, and somewhat inappropriate in many ways for that child to, in some ways, it's inappropriate for most children to be stuck in the middle and reporting back and forth, but they absolutely may not have the developmental skills to do that. So that's also what your statement makes me think of. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And you're right. I don't want any kid having to do that,
Hmm.
right? But some kids who have maybe more strengths in terms of flexibility and cognitive shifting and being able to like adapt to things are going to do better in that like 1 week I'm in Rome and 1 week I'm in New York, right?
Yeah.
Like you almost want to think about it like a different country, right? Different
Hmm.
language, different routines, different everything. The house smells different. The food is
Hmm.
different, right? So there's all these factors that make that really hard for a lot of kids, and in particular children with sensitivities, right? So you can't really do that style of parenting because at minimum there needs to be communication about baseline functioning
Hmm.
systemic stuff, right?
Yeah.
We didn't sleep at all on Tuesday night. Refused to eat. Now suddenly we're not eating cottage cheese anymore. We loved cottage cheese. It was a staple at my house. And
Hmm.
now this week we're not doing it. I need to know why, right?
Hmm.
These little nuances that parents know and pick up about their kids.
Hmm.
Right? She's getting a little bit emotional. I'm a little worried that we're getting sick, right?
Hmm.
Or,
Right.
hey, I've been hearing this thing about this peer at school and I don't really know what's going on, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
Hmm.
Parents that are in a co-parenting dynamic where they don't communicate, you keep that information to yourself because it's protective, because your co-parent may use it against you or attack you or whatever it might be. But kids don't do well in that
Hmm.
sort of dynamic. And kids really don't do well when there's conflict. So the more conflict, the more stress on the system, the harder it is for everybody. So even if you're in a co-parenting dynamic that is very stressful, you have to find a way to communicate about those baseline
Hmm.
daily functionings, you know?
Yeah. What are some ways you've seen it done really well?
Yeah. So a lot of parents that I work with have co-parenting apps. So there's
Hmm.
Our Family Wizard or Civil Communicator, something like that. There's a new one out there called Best Interest, which is really great and it helps use AI to like rephrase your messages and
Oh,
like
interesting.
them out, right? And so if you're writing a message and you're like, this is pretty good about like how the week went, it might catch it and be like, hey, this sounds a little accusatory, or this sounds a little bit
Huh.
not helpful for your co-parenting dynamic. So those kinds of tools are really good. I even recommend just an email template that you both
Hmm.
fill out every transition day, right? And
Hmm.
send it. We used to write them out like a report card almost, but that have defined areas. How was their sleep? How was homework this week? How were medications? How were therapy? All of those
Hmm.
sorts of things. So you just can kind of jot it in and keep it very civil, but also what you might need to know. And this is
Hmm.
assuming this isn't somebody that you can just text and be like, "Hey, what happened at OT last week?"
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people need a little more structure to that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And we also don't want to just be communicating about the the difficulties. Um, we want to also be communicating about what's going well. right?
Yeah.
And so that's an important piece as well.
Definitely. And so when do you notice kind of like little yellow, I call them yellow flags, maybe not red flags, but yellow flags to the balance of that getting off, maybe with communication or with the roles? And, what should someone be looking for so they can kind of get in front of it rather than waiting till something becomes a big problem?
Yeah. Do you think with the kids or do you think just
Either one. I think either parent communication, little yellow flags, or with the kids. I know when I work with kids, they're like you just mentioned, like, crankiness. I think we're getting sick. Like these are like intuitive things we know about our kids, especially our kids who are very um, nervous system sensitive. Like,
Mhm.
missing 30 minutes of sleep could really have an impact and it wouldn't on another child. Or having a 99 fever, they may be like laying on the floor and another kid with a 99 fever is like, doesn't even know they have a fever. So
And my husband's always like, "That's not a fever." I'm like, "Yes, it
it,
is. They're warm. They're warmer than
it can be, yes.
the."
So it all depends on how the child feels. So I know in many families, there can be one parent that a child may talk to more, or one parent that a child may, you know, show their true self a little more, we'll say. That could be them having a meltdown, right? So I guess this is a question too about emotional roles with the child, like almost like attachment roles. Like if a parent's feeling like they're really pulling that weight more, um, what are some ways that they can start communicating? It may be that like you're looking for the strengths of your co-parenting partner and asking them to step that up a little bit more, but just any ideas with those differences too?
Well, I think you just said it, right? I think you said part of it is that I think it's an internal process as well to start noticing when you're like, wow, if you have the thought to yourself, like, I'm just going to take care of it because they won't,
Mm,
that's probably a signal, right?
yes, that is,
Like,
and that's good for everyone, married or not.
yeah, right. We're over functioners, especially when our kids need us, right? There's
Hmm.
not a choice. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to make sure it gets done. But that is a recipe to build some resentment over time,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
So I think really noticing when you're having those thought processes, I think the piece that you're talking about of remembering what they do bring to the table, right? So this saying to yourself when you're like on hold with children's for an hour trying to get an appointment, that actually doesn't happen at our children's, but maybe you're waiting a long time to talk to the insurance company or something. And you're feeling salty about it, reminding yourself like, yeah, but my co-parent asked all these really good questions in that appointment and interpreted these results and
Hmm.
had their little binder full of all the lab results that we've had recently. Like, that was really helpful. I can do this part. So some of it is your own internal work, right?
Hmm.
From kids, you want to be watching for any comments that they make, right? Dad forgot this again. Mom said that I don't need to be in this therapy. She said that this is a waste of time, whatever it might be, right?
Hmm.
So watching those little comments, not necessarily because they're true, kind of to your earlier point, they might not be the best at telling stories or recalling what
Hmm.
happened, but just you're logging like, what's my child picking up on? And at what point do I need to address it with my co parent? Either a productive, like helpful conversation or a higher level of support, right?
Hmm.
So you're watching that type of stuff. And then, as always, you and I are always very much paying attention to what's happening with our kids and their nervous system.
Hmm.
Right? Are we seeing like huge, huge, huge dysregulation for long periods of time after they come back?
Hmm.
Some dysregulation is expected. It's a transition. We're going to see it, right?
Hmm.
But if you're like, wow, this is way more than I ever have seen or know how to manage, or like this is just a big trouble spot, that's a yellow flag to talk to your co parent.
Hmm.
What are you doing about this? Is there a way we can support this better? Like, how do we problem solve? Right.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about this before, but it's coming to my mind of the transitions between homes, right? And autism. And I I know I've worked with families on making visuals to prep kids, but when we've got kids that struggle with time management, struggle with shifting, cognitive shifting of doing this, doing that. We talked a little bit, but we didn't totally get into it about things being the same across homes. We kind of talked about how it doesn't work as well, right? For it not to be the same, for you just to put blinders on. But let's talk a little bit about how can we make things similar, and how do you see success in setting up, like strategies for setting up that shift across homes? And a lot of people will ask me, like, what's the best schedule for these kids? There probably, you would agree, there is no one best anything, because every one of these kids is different.
Different. Yeah. I mean, my intuition on that, and I don't know, but my intuition is probably less transitions. Like, these
Mhm.
are not kids that I want going back and forth every day, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So this is kind of that's my like gut response, but I don't know the research on it offhand. I think the things that I talk to parents about are thinking about it as if they are siblings, not twins, right?
Mhm.
Your home should be similar, but of course, it's not going to be exactly the same, right?
Mhm.
Even when you're in the same house, bedtime looks different when dad does it versus
Right.
when mom does it, or when, you know, inclusive of all families, when one parent does it or the other, right? That's very common. But some similarities remain. We do 8 o'clock. This is the routine. We do books, and then we do snuggle, and then we do
Mhm.
then lights out, then our like whatever, right? So similar, but you're
Mhm.
not going to do it exactly the same. You're not going to say the exact same words and the sit in the exact same way. That's
Right.
too much pressure, right?
Right.
So the other thing, I like visuals, I like rituals, so things that you do on both ends of the transition. So how do we say goodbye every time, and how do we say hello every time?
Mhm.
I like when those are heavy on connection. So it's really easy. And for some kids, this might feel more comforting, but it's really easy to get into like, well, you take your bag downstairs and you empty your laundry and then you take a shower and then you settle in. That's okay, right?
Mhm.
But I'd rather it's something like we sit down together, we work on our puzzle, or we sit and watch your favorite show, or we go out and get ice cream, whatever it might be, something that's heavier on connection,
Mhm.
I think is more regulating. Some children who have autism are going to like more of the structured, like, I need to put my things away. I
Mhm.
want to get things settled in and then I feel good. Right.
Yeah, and that I see as they are reconnecting with the space. So some kids really love that logistical structure of, I'm going through this routine. And we see this, and we were talking about it in the context of transitioning between homes, but we see this coming home from school, or leaving for a trip, coming home from a trip. There's this, it can border a little bit on an OCD type behavior.
Yeah.
That is true. So where that becomes problematic is when kids get stuck and they can't move on, and they get emotionally upset if they can't do it that way. However, it can be soothing. The reason I'm going off on a tangent here, but the reason that OCD will get, problematic is because it starts as a soothing thing. Like, it starts because it feels good to people and it creates order. It's a coping strategy for dysregulation. So it creates order, it creates predictability, but then it can go so far as to impacting emotions and relationships, and missing out on things they want to do because they're stuck on doing things a certain way. But back to this point, some kids, some autistic children will really actually feel connected to the home, or maybe the pets, with some logistical jobs. And so what I want people to take away is, your kid, and that if your kid needs to kind of get back to home base in your house and that makes them feel connected, maybe you're doing those tasks along with them. And if your kid needs to really have social and emotional connection rooted in really like deeper relationship, then do that. No, I call it forced fun. No forced fun is going to make a child feel welcome. So whatever you feel like is soothing to your child, that could be a relationship and could be the logistics, right?
I think you're right. I mean, I think about when I travel, I go to a hotel. I want to put my suitcase away. I want to take out my
Yeah.
bag. Like, and then I usually am like, okay, Now what do I do? Right? And so the other piece that I think is really helpful is typically transition days, we want to lower demands.
Yes. Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, this is not the day to be like, well, listen, your drawers have been overflowing and it's time now we go through them and take out your small clothes. Or please go walk the dog. Walk the dog if it's regulating and it's a connection strategy. But if that's like your typical, this is your expectation, this is your chore or something, this is not the day to die on that hill. Right? This is
Right.
the day that you might be like, "Hey, why don't we go play with him in the backyard?" Or, "I'm just gonna take him for a walk." The dog, not the kid. I mean, you could do both of those with a child as well. But, like, the point is you lower demands. It's not the day to, like, be really intense about the chores or even homework or whatever it might be, you know? And so and you will get back to that, right?
Yes.
So it's you're not doing this forever. You're doing this for the transition day to kind of keep everybody in their lane.
And how I think about that, and that's a strategy for all autistic children, and many, emotionally sensitive ADHD kids as well, if they've been doing a lot of heavy lifting in the executive functioning department, like they've been at school all day, or they've, had a big test that day or something. But when we ask a child to do a hard emotional thing, so something like, think about your kid and what is dysregulating to them. If transition is dysregulating, if just being at school is hard for them, this is an equivalent to like your kid walks in from school and you start talking to them about doing their chores. Like, that's why they look at you like, no. That's why they're like, melt down, right? So we think about those windows of time of catching our kids when they have the emotional stamina, just the brain bandwidth to handle some of those things. So yeah, great strategy for lots of times of the day. You just gotta know your kid. This takes me back to like the window of tolerance chat about, how we all have a window of tolerance and there are things that will send us outside of that window of tolerance, and transitioning between homes will be one, possibly until they get used to it. And then it becomes like not that dysregulating because they're used to it.
And I would say, honestly, Dr. Emily, I think that transitioning between homes is you can almost universally approach that as dysregulating.
Yeah.
For a long time. Like,
Yeah.
they will get used to it, but you might have a kid that's very used to it, and then suddenly you're like, why is this an issue again? It just takes a big chunk of that bandwidth.
That's a really good point. And I assume it often will be something else is going on that's dysregulating. And they're like, oh, not this. I can't do that and this today. Like, something big at school.
It's a huge lift, no matter when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know lots of people are going to have more questions. I feel like we are just opening a can of worms here. Yeah, so on whatever platform you are listening to this, you may be listening to this on my podcast or YouTube, or you may have seen a clip of it somewhere. The recording will live over on Substack, so head over there to live chats on Substack, and you can see all of the history of the live chats that I do. But Dr. Karalynn, tell us how people can find your work and learn more from you.
Yeah, so I am across most channels. So I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook. It's with Learn with Little House, similar to yours.
Yeah.
Little House is the name of my psychology practice. So it's also the name of my coaching business and a little spin on that. So Learn with Little House is a great way to find us on Instagram. We have a podcast ourselves called the Kids First Co-Parenting Podcast. So if this is relevant, that is the place to go find all kinds of information about how to support kids in general with two-parent homes.
That's awesome. Okay, y'all. Well, I will see you next time on the live chats, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah.